Mars and Venus. Have you guys ever wondered what the other sex is like? Tonight you're gonna find out. Unless you already know. Dr. Tracy's gonna come out. He has a lot of information. It's like 3 hours long. Are you guys prepared for that? Just kidding. He'll be done quick tonight. We won't be here for that long, but enjoy. The refreshments are back there, and just have a little fun tonight. That's what it's meant for.
All right, you guys ready for this? So I cannot tell you how excited I was when I got this topic, right? Because we do so many different health talks in this office, and they're usually like based on some pretty heavy stuff, right? Nutrition and diet and exercise and all this stuff. So to go through this topic is going to be so fun. And I was told I was going to do it with Dr. Josh. So I was all excited to do it with Dr. Josh, and then everyone knows what happened to Dr. Josh, right? So then I was told I was going to do it with Dr. Osborne, and then I get to do it all by myself. So I've been diving into this subject, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to try to do tonight. As I was looking at all this information, I'm like, what I'm really trying to do is show you guys how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Like, it is so crazy, the male-female differences, but it's really interesting tonight. What I hope you guys get out tonight is how we have a lot of major differences between men and women. We're more alike than we are different, but the differences fit each other like Legos. It's really, really cool. So tonight, what I want you to do is sit back, relax, just take in this information. The idea tonight is that the stuff I give you is going to help your life be better. It's going to help you understand men. It's going to help you understand women. We're going to talk about how we're different and how we're alike and everything. So before we do that, let me jump in. Let's talk about our mission real quick. Everyone knows this office is about helping people. And at the end of this, I'll be asking you who should have been here. Because the more you tag into these events, the more you tag into this group, the more synergy we create, the more people get healthier. I did the doctor's report the other night, and one thing I said was, we save lives, not by pulling people out of swimming pools or out of fires, we save lives by getting people into classes like this. We teach them how to be healthy. We turn your health around now, later in life you don't have major health problems. That's our main goal in this office. Dr. Osborne has put together an amazing team. I found that slide on there, and I know Dr. Osborne would agree. I hope you guys know, every time before we come out and start adjusting people, we go into that room, we regroup, and we pray for each and every one of you. And that's what we look like inside that room before we come out. And I thought that picture is very suiting for exactly what we look like before we walk out, because we take this job very, very serious in what we're doing and changing lives and helping people. So are you ready to dive into this?
Yes.
This is the fasten your seatbelt. Okay, because it's going to be kind of fun and crazy, some of the stuff we're going to talk about. Let me start. I have gone through so many different literatures. I'll try to tell you guys the books and stuff and the articles I got from it. So if you want to go read on them, it's really interesting. The first one is from I wanted to go through this, it's crazy. This was called For Men Only. They also created a series called For Women Only. These are some therapists. And basically what they did, it's a couple, husband and wife, and they did surveys. Like they surveyed thousands and thousands and thousands of women to create a series called For Women Only. And it was such a huge success that they went out and did a bunch of men's surveys. And they did For Women Only, where they talk about what women and men say in these surveys. And this one I thought was really riveting. It says, how often do you think about the relationship? How often do people think about the relationship? The relationship you're in, how often is it on your mind? So 7 out of 10 women said that they think of the relationship occasional to nearly always. I thought, well, that's a widespread, right? And right away I read that, I thought, well, that's crazy. 70% said occasional. As my male brain, watch this, said occasional. That's like not very often, right? All the way up to what? Nearly always. Listen to this. Less than 20% of them, women, said they only think of it when things were difficult. And 10% said they never really ever thought of it. So women always think of it, but I still bother the occasional. So if you keep reading it, it said, men, when they asked the same question, said they think of it too. They think of it occasional. The numbers were kind of similar, but they really got down to it when they asked men to define occasional. And I thought, oh, I'm really smart. I thought the same thing the researchers thought, right? They said, what's occasional to men? Ready for this? Here's what men define as occasional. Men said, yeah, I think of the relationship occasional, like birthdays, anniversaries, and when things go bad. And I thought, that's about right for me. That's occasional. That's probably about right. All right. Women said, are you ready for this? They said define occasional. You know what women said? They said occasional for us is several times a week, which is mind-blowing, right? right? Such a difference in the definition of what occasional means, okay? 80% of women, 4 out of 5, report that sometimes they feel insecure about their relationships. And women under the age of 45 reports that it jumps to 91% feel insecure about their relationship. It's a lot. Women with children in junior high or lower, they said it was universal. Almost 100% of them felt insecure about their relationships. Men, on the other hand, reported that they don't worry about their relationships. Almost 95% of men said we don't worry about them. 95% of men said there's nothing to worry about. Are we on different waves? 100% on different waves, right? I hope what I'm getting to you is you guys start getting this, you'll understand a little bit of the Rubik's Cube. I got a ton of good stuff coming. Where you understand like how we think differently and why we do, okay? Women said when the relationship is at odds, quote, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters, okay? Men again reported that there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Right? Women have an unbelievable radar for unspoken communication. We'll talk about that in the middle. I'm going to throw these away and go to my slides in a second, but I want to share with these notes really quick because I thought they were so important and they didn't get on my slides. Women reported there's a magic bullet for fights. There's a magic bullet. When I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, this is me to a T. Women said there's a magic bullet. And what they said is 95% of women said that they feel that this eliminates the insecurity. 86% said they could give space if a man would only do this. And that is, men tend to run to their cave. And we'll talk about why physiologically and neurologically they do that. Men tend to run to their cage to replenish and regroup. And women said in the minute of a fight, the worst thing a man can do is what, women? Leave. It's the worst thing. So they talk about women's number one thing is they're always insecure about relationships. And we'll talk hopefully a little about why that is. Okay? There's a reason for that, by the way. There's a good reason. Most scientists have figured out why we think that occurs. They're insecure. And the worst thing the man can do is what? Leave. But the number one thing the males want to do is what? Leave. Right? So women said this across the board. Almost 90% of them said, if the man said this to him, I am really upset right now, but we are okay. And I will be back. And almost 90% of women said, if he said that, I'm okay. I will give him time to go away. It's the moment when they leave and don't say that. Eye-opening. I've done that in relationships, get into the argument, and I bolt. It's just a natural reflex. I take off. But that comment alone said, women said, I feel good. Here's the trick, though. You guys ready for this? The trick is the man has to come back to the relationship. That's where I was reading that, and that's when my eyes started twitching. Like, wait, what? I have to actually come back? I thought I got clear and got out of it, right? So women said, as long as he comes back. Now listen to this. Almost all the women said, hey, if he said, we're okay, reassures me, and he leaves, I'll give him time. As long as he does what? As long as he comes back. And they said one of the worst things a man can do is make the woman have to bring the topic back up. So that's the magic bullet. In those moments, men can leave, but they've got to come back. They've got to reinitiate that conversation on their own and show them that they're interested. And most women report that's great. Now, in a minute, I'll talk more about neurology, but men will go to their cave time. By the way, cave time for a man is they need a place to hide. Okay? That turns out to be television. It talks about driving in a car, which is weird because sometimes on a busy day I'm thinking, man, you know what the best thing to do is if I just got in the car and drove to LA right now, or maybe Utah, I'd drive to New York right now would be great, right? Like and I think, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to find a place in the cave to just regroup, right? Shopping. I had one woman on a video I was watching on YouTube. She said their relationship was pretty good, but she said she started noticing her husband got off work at 5, but he didn't show up till 6:30. And so she started calling, and she says, I was really, concerned, right? She was worried about the relationship. Shocking. Most women say they are. She couldn't figure out what it was. Then she started finding out, you know what he was doing? He would leave work, and he'd swing by the store and spend about an hour or so just walking and shopping. He was regrouping, right? Like in his head, he's regrouping. I'll show you the physiology of that in a few minutes. In the old days, you know how men used to do it? Anybody ever see the newspaper up like that? That was how the old days did it. Now we have TV, we've got sports, okay, all kinds of good stuff. I love this question they asked women. They said, what's the number one thing that bothers you, or the number one thing you could change about your brain? 90+% of women said, if I could get the voices to stop. If I could get the voices to stop. And I'll show you in a minute what that means, because all the men are here thinking, what are you talking about? But every woman will tell you their thoughts are crazy. I had my son read a book called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. We'll get to that in a little bit. And I'm going to tell you a funny story. I'm sitting on a ski lift, and my girlfriend's here, and my son is here, and we're on the ski lift, and we're going up, and my son leans over and he goes, "Dad, isn't that crazy that they don't have an empty box?" And I go, "That is crazy, isn't it?" And we sit there for a minute, and my girlfriend goes, "Yeah." She goes, "What are you guys thinking of?" Nothing. I was just looking at the pine tree. And I looked at my son and I go, "What were you thinking about?" He goes, "Nothing." And then I looked at him and I go, watch this. I go, "Well, what were you thinking?" And she goes, "Well, I was thinking it's 9:30 right now, and my kids are skiing down on the hill, and I was worried about what they're doing right now." She goes, "I was trying to figure out in my head, what will we do for lunch, and what time will we take lunch?" And she said, "Will I be able to pick up the kids?" And she goes, I was thinking, are we going to go down that run today, or will we jump down this other run and ski?" And she was also thinking, we're going to get done around 3:30. Will we leave before the lifts close? And if we get back, what will we have for dinner? She thought, she goes, I started thinking, listen, she went off, she even forgot to ask the question. She started talking aloud. She started thinking, I was also thinking, should we do burritos for dinner tonight, or should I do the leftovers that I brought up there in the refrigerator? And she kept going, and I looked at my son, and we both went, oh my gosh. She was running, and women, by the way, whenever I say this, everyone shakes their head, you get it, and all the men go, I don't get that. I literally don't get that. Okay, we have a lot of fun stuff to go. Here's what I don't want you to think. It always gets sketchy when you go into this because it gets competitive. What I want you to understand is it's not competitive. It's not a matter of who's smarter, who's faster, who's all that. It works out that we're like Legos. We're designed to be together. We actually complement each other very, very well. You're going to watch how that happens as we do our different jobs, okay? We're more like Legos. It's not a competition. There's always great jokes like this. A woman walked into the kitchen to find her husband stalking around with a fly swatter. She asked him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm hunting flies." She said, "Really? Did you get any yet? Did you kill any?" He said, "Yep, I got 3 males and 2 females," he replied. She questioned it. She thought to herself, how can you tell them apart? And he said, 3 were on the beer can and 2 were on the phone. That's funny, isn't it? Now, wherever there's smoke, there's fire. There's some truth there, right? There's a lot of truth. I'll show you where that comes from. Okay, a lot of this information comes from all these things. Controlled studies, tons of brain scans. Now we have the ability to scan brains and look at where the brain activity is working. I got some really crazy stuff to show you guys on some scans on brains and what we do. Anthropology, looking at history and how we've developed and how we interrelate with each other, and a lot of books. Okay? If you like this stuff, because this is only about an hour or so of this stuff I can go through, you can ask me. I'll tell you there's some really interesting things to dive in and read on. Okay, now it always gets a little crazy when you go through these. And one of what's known as a logic fallacy is when people hear something they don't like. There's like 6 to 12 of these logic fallacies which people fall in. One's called a straw man. One's called these different things where people go, that's not true because of this. One of the ones I want you to be careful is what's called a hasty generalization. What that means is, I'm going to say, women do this. And there's always someone that says, well, I don't do that. Or my aunt doesn't do that. And I get it. Not everybody does that. Okay? So you don't get to win the argument by using a number one of one person, right? You don't get to go, well, I don't cut my hair like that. Well, I know you don't, but a bell curve, right? That's what we're looking at on these. These are trends. These aren't 100%. Most people do this. Some people do a lot of it. Some people do none of it. Okay? So no jumping in here with hasty generalizations, and you know it's a good talk when you get Calvin Hobbes on there, right? All right. Great book right here called It's Not You, It's Your Biology. I would encourage every single person to read it. I've had all my kids read it. They love it. It's just mind-blowing. What his premise of the book is that men, he goes, if you want to understand the difference between men and women, you have to understand that men are sperm spreaders. That's what they do. And women, he refers to them as egg garters. And he said the reason is women to get pregnant is a gigantic risk. It takes enormous energy. As a human being, when a female gets, if you go back a few thousand years ago, he talks about if a woman gets pregnant, what happens? She's got 9 months where what? Her energy demands are much, much higher. So that's harder for her. Second of all, she's pregnant and she can't move very well and very fast. So she's at high risk. That's just the beginning of her investment, right? Because as a human being, we birth little creatures that can't even move for months. So now she's holding this little creature that she has to take care of. Other mammals look at us like we're crazy because we birth these little fetuses basically that don't move. It's because of our huge head size, by the way. So we have to birth them early. Other animals, what? As soon as they birth, what happens? They hop up and start running around, right? So humans know, if I get pregnant, I have to take care of this baby for a long time. I'm locked down, I'm at high risk, I've got an animal. So women are very particular about who they decide to hook up with. Men, on the other hand, tend to be, hey, I'm just going to do everything here. I'm just going to keep moving my genes around as best I can. Some very interesting things in this book that I find funny. The battle is inside or outside. They did some studies on certain animals' sperm. I think this is just a funny one. And they found out that sperm actually are different. Some of them are really fast. And so when they're inside, they actually form like a little battlefield and they knock things off and they shoot one sperm up and they try to win this battle. Very aggressive, very tactical sperm inside. Those are the ones where the mammals mate with multiple men, or not men, males, right? So if the species is mating, if one female ends up mating with multiple males, the battle to get your genes moved up is where? Inside. So the sperm are very aggressive and they're very tactical inside. Super interesting. Now, if the animal, like a gorilla, mates, he wins, he's the alpha male, he gets to mate with as many females as he wants, guess what his sperms are? Dumb and slow. They're methodical, there's no battle inside. Why? Because the fight for the female was where? Outside. It wasn't inside. It was outside. The fight was out with teeth and claws and muscles, and he won, and then he gets all the females, and his sperm just do whatever, they just meander up. Really interesting stuff. Here's another one I think you'll laugh. In the book, he talks about testicular size. I know it's kind of a weird topic, but he said the larger the mammal's testicles, the more they cheat. Isn't that crazy? He said the larger the testicles, the more they cheat. And what he meant by that is, yeah. And we'll get to that at the question. He's like, he does this whole chapter about like different animals. The larger the male testicles, the more they sleep around. Really interesting. Gorillas, by the way, tiny little testicles don't sleep around. Right? And in the book, he goes, you're all wondering the same question, because you were all wondering the same question too, right? Where are we? We're right in the middle. We're right dead center in the middle on that one, okay? Another study out of the book, which is super interesting to show you how this stuff works. They took a look at people that had different size body parts, like bigger ears, bigger necks, longer noses, all that stuff, and they put them up in front of people, and they said, tell us what you think as far as what's the body part that's different. And like 90% of people would say, oh, his ears are big. Or, oh, she has a long neck. Or, oh, she has. So they would go and measure these people, and they would measure her ears, and what they found over and over and over and over is that people were right. They could pick it out, but here's the thing. The average ear was that big. The ear they were talking that was too big was just slightly bigger. And they said, it's amazing, our ability to pick out very slight deviations that are away from normal. Now, how great is that, and why is that important? Here's why. Because you ever see that bird, that one female bird that's sitting there, and what, there's like 5 males doing the mating dance, right? And they all look the same to me, and they all look the same to you, right? Feathers are flying, and they're all working for it, right? I'm like, somehow magically she picks one out, right? And so in the book, what they talk about is she has the ability to pick out very fine details, because she's not going to give up that egg for someone who's not going to help her be healthy down the road. So our ability to pick out very fine things to make sure our genes can move forward is really, really out of control specific. Really interesting. It's a great book. You should read it. It's really fun. He writes it with a lot of humor. Now we get to an interesting point. One of my favorite researchers is Robert Sapolsky. He's a Stanford professor. He does a lot of research on stress. This is his stress book. If you haven't read that, gosh, you should get that. It's so interesting. He does work with baboons. Okay, he's out in the field with baboons all the time, researching how their physiology works and everything. But he also does a lot of work on free will. And you can go on YouTube and listen to him do a lot of lectures. And his whole premise on this is, do we really have free will? Or are we driven by our physiology and our neurology from our past relatives and our lifestyles and everything? And he argues, very, very interesting, but guess what? We don't have free will. We think we do, but we don't. In other words, our brains, our physiology, our chemistry dictates what we do in advance. One of the examples he gives is you're driving down the street. Up pops the McDonald's sign and you think, I think I'm hungry. You weren't actually hungry, until you saw the sign that triggered your saliva glands. Remember Pavlov's dog with the bell? It triggered you and your body thought, let's eat, and you went over, right? In other words, that's not free will. You were dictated by the marketing program to go eat. So he talks about free will. He uses a really incredible study that was done in Australia on judges. Judges who were dealing with people who had broken their probation. This judge has to decide, these judges have to decide if the person who broke their probation goes back to jail or if they get to go free to the street. And after doing prolonged studies on these multiple judges in Australia, you know what they found out? The one thing, the absolute one thing to determine whether the person went back to jail or went back on the street was singularly this option, which was they hungry or not? If the judge was hungry, the person went back to jail. If the judge wasn't hungry, they went free. Do we have free will? I would argue it might be up to date, right? It might be up to date. Whether that judge is hungry, their blood sugar's low, they're not in a good mood, boom, you're going back to jail. Really interesting stuff. He talks a lot about that. So as I walk you through this and I show you guys the brain chemistry, realize a lot of this stuff is actually pre-programmed in us. We all think, oh, I'm doing this because I think it's going to be pre-wired in you. Here's some of the gender health things I want you to see. First of all, here's a great question. Anybody think of that? Why do men have nipples? Why do we have them? Dr. Osborne said, well, because we can get them pierced. So I don't think, he had the luxury of not having to get up here. I said, well, okay, that's not going to work. But it's funny and it makes sense.
That's when he decided he was going to do the talk himself.
So the reason men have nipples, they believe, is because we all start out as females. When you're born inside, early in the beginning, we're all females. The Y chromosome, okay, when it jumps, it only codes for 100 genes. So women are XX, okay, men are XY. So you get the Y one from your dad. And when that kicks in, we start out, we're developing the same way. And at some point, that Y chromosome kicks in and it bathes that little baby's body in testosterone. And the party changes dramatically. Things grow differently. The body changes. The neurologic system changes. The vision changes. The hearing changes. We're about to show you all of those things. Women are more prone to hormonal diseases because they have a lot of genes. Men, look at what they're more prone to. Gene mutations. You know why? They don't have as many genes because they have a Y chromosome that only codes for 100 genes. So we're a little bit less in that department. Let's talk about some of the big changes here biology-wise. Men are bigger, no doubt about that. We know that. Okay? Men are stronger, but not really. Not really. Men have more muscle, but if you actually take out a small part of muscle from a female and the same amount from men, guess what? It's the exact same strength. It's just that men have more of the same fibers. That's the only difference. We're really not stronger. We just have more of it. Men's ligaments are stronger. Ligaments are the tough bands that hold the bones together, so they're a lot stronger. Okay? Women's ligaments are more lax. Men have a greater what's called Vo2 Max. That stands for volume of oxygen. And it's a measurement that we use to check someone's fitness level. In other words, you put them on a machine like this, you hook them up to a mask. We used to do this, my undergrad's in exercise physiology. So we would put people in the human performance lab, okay? And you hook them up, and what you read is how much carbon dioxide they're kicking out. Because that gives you a measurement of how well they're using oxygen. And then what you do, by the way, if anybody says, hey, you want to do your Vo2 Max, you should immediately say no, okay? And the reason you say no is if you haven't done it, you have to exercise until you fail. That's known as throwing up. You put them on a treadmill, okay, and they start running, and they start running, and you just keep snapping a whip at them, and you run, and then you take the treadmill and you start angling it up, and you get them until they fail. You got to get them to a high level, and you just measure how much of the oxygen they're using. That gives you the ability of that human being to use oxygen. Men's Vo2 max is higher, right, than women. Women have 2/3 of the strength of men. Their ligaments are more lax, but here's interesting, they're smaller. They have wider pelvises. Women have better balance. They're lower to the ground, center of gravity is lower, they have better balance than men. Think about that. Why? Women have babies, women stay low, women hold, there's a lot of reasons you start breaking it down. Women are actually more efficient at converting glycogen. Now, what is glycogen? The body, when you eat food, it turns it into blood sugar called glucose. If you don't use it, it goes and stores it in the liver and the muscles in the form of glycogen. It's just a big molecule of storage. Women, it turns out, are actually really, really efficient at reaching back in and getting that energy and bringing it back out. Men are not. Everybody ever heard of when you exercise, you hit the wall? Has anybody hit the wall? I've hit the wall many times. You're running or swimming and you're like, and I'm done. I am not going any faster. I'm completely done, right? That's hitting the wall. Women rarely hit the wall. They're really good elite athletes. They're really strong. In fact, in many elite athletic events, women win over men. They don't hit the wall. Men can go faster for a while, but we bonk out. Women tend to do better with the glycogen. Here's one of my lovely ones. I got this. I thought it was so interesting. When we're born, male baby's retina, that's the back of your eyeball that reads the light that comes in, male baby retinas are thicker. Female babies have thin retinas. Male retinas are full of what are called M cells. M cells are the light cells that respond in your eye to motion. Male babies are looking at motion. Female babies have more P cells. They're thinner retina in the back of the eye and they're full of P cells. P cells are designed to look at detail, textures, angles, faces. Cool study. They took babies. Didn't tell the researchers whether it was a boy or a girl baby. Put them in a crib. Inside the crib, there's a mobile moving around. Okay? On this side of the crib is a female nurse with her head in looking at the baby. 85% of the male babies focused on what? The mobile. It's moving. 85% of them focus on the mobile and not look at the face. 90% of the girl babies focused on what? The face. The face. They focused on the face. They're more about details. Isn't it interesting? Who ends up hunting and looking at things moving? The males. Right? Who hears better? Women hear better. But more specifically, they hear high tones better. Why? Babies, right? High-pitched noises, women hear better than males. So when you're talking and you go, he's not listening, it's true, he can't hear. That's why he literally can't hear, okay? Men have more testosterone. We're going to talk about that as we move through here. More testosterone makes you bigger, makes you stronger, makes you more aggressive, makes you pay a huge health price in stress. Stress and testosterone, it drives you crazy, it makes you really aggressive, but it also creates heart disease, creates strokes, and it makes you die earlier. Men pay a huge price for being big, aggressive fighters and protectors. We die earlier than women. Women have more knee injuries. I like this one. It's kind of interesting. Remember, they have more lax ligaments, but one thing they think about is that women have these wider pelvises, therefore their knees under more stress. And it's not small, by the way. Women basketball players at collegiate level blow out their knees at about 50 to 60% higher rate than males. Volleyball players are the same. They think it's because the Q angle, they're a little more knock-kneed because the hips are wired, so the knees are kind of bent in, and they blow out their ligaments a lot more rate than men do. Male mind versus female mind. Okay, here's how this works. Inside of a male's brain, there's boxes. Okay? They're boxes. And there's a lot of them. And none of them touch. They're all very nicely placed. Okay? And they're organized in there, little boxes, and they all have little lids, and they're all great. And if you come up to me and say, would you like to talk about the San Jose Sharks? I go, oh my God, I would love to talk about the San Jose Sharks. And I would walk over very carefully, not to disturb any other boxes, and I would very carefully pull out the San Jose Sharks box, and I would bring it over, and I would set it on the table, and I would go, are you ready for this? We're going to talk about the Sharks. And I would open up the box, and I would talk about it. When we're done, I would close the box, put it back where it belongs, making sure it makes no contact to anything else in there, so it's nice and safe, it's untouched, it's lovely. Now, here's the crazy thing, women, guess what I also have? Over here, where you can't see, I have a box that you pull out, guess what's in it? We all have empty boxes. And we love the empty box. It's a place we get to go and hang out and think of nothing. It's awesome. And a lot of women say, oh my gosh, I would love to have that. Can I come by your place and just hang out in the empty box? And the answer is no, you cannot. You cannot. And you know why you can't? Because as soon as you come into my empty box, you're going to come in and go, well, this is really boring. We should have a picture right there. I'm like, no, that's why you're not allowed to be in here. I don't want a picture in the box. It's an empty box where I get to go hang out by myself. Right? And you come in and go, well, we should have a couch, or there should be some flowers over here, and a pet would be great in here, and we should put a radio. I mean, like, no. Okay? No. Men have empty boxes. That's what we do. Women, on the other hand, what? Everything is connected to everything. Women's brains look like a big ball of wire. Everything is interlaced. That's what a woman's brain looks like. Everything. Everything is touching everything, right? It's amazing. Do you know why you guys are so good at multitasking? Because everything is connected to everything. You guys can think of like 17 different things at the same time, right? John Gray, and I'll get to his stuff here as we go through, told a really good story. He said, the first time I realized this, he goes, I was at home, we had 3 kids, my kids were all young. He goes, I'd come home from work. He goes, the 2 kids were in the living room tearing it up. My wife was holding the baby and she was making dinner. I came in and she said, John, you're running late again. He's like, I didn't even realize I was running late, but okay. He said, I went in, she's cooking. He goes, the phone rang, she's holding the baby, she answers the phone. And he goes, I was over at the kitchen table, like putting my stuff down. And she said, John, it's for you, it's your friend, Rick. And he said, everything, it's just chaos. He picks it up and he goes, hey, Rick. And he goes, I can't hear you because there's all this stuff going on. He said, I walked out of the kitchen into the other room. And he goes, Rick was talking to me. He's like, yeah, I think I can go golfing on Saturday. And he said, then is when my life changed. From the other room, his wife said, John, you can't golf. We're going to the club on Saturday. And he said, oh my God. How did she do that? She was cooking, holding the baby, monitoring the other kids in the other room. And what was she doing? Listening to my conversation, considering the calendar for what was coming in a month or 2. And he was like, I couldn't even focus on the conversation, right? Like, he goes, I had one thing. That's that spaghetti. He goes, it's amazing. Women's brains are really more efficient, right? Now, men have the gift of kind of being able to focus on one thing, right? But women's brains are go. For a male, this is crucial to understand. It's absolutely crucial to understand, okay? Because women are constantly processing information. Men are not. Came across this book, Morality Molecules, written by Paul Zak. Paul Zak said he didn't want to study men and women, but he kind of stumbled into it. And he started taking a look at oxytocin. So oxytocin is typically associated with breastfeeding and pregnancy, and women have oxytocin. And he said he started looking at it, and he said it's actually a really shallow molecule. It's hard to isolate. It's in the brain. You have to catch it really quick. It comes out and it disappears quickly if you don't get it. He said we figured out how to do that. He's sort of been studying it for 10 years. And it's pretty amazing. He said oxytocin, when it's in your brain, it makes you feel secure. Dim lighting will increase it. People know it makes you, if you get a hug from somebody, they've done a lot of studies, if someone comes up and gives you a hug, your brain releases oxytocin, and you want to hug them back. It's like a love molecule. It's really cool. If someone comes up and gives you money, you feel good about them, oxytocin's released, and you want to give money back, you want to help people, it makes you feel good about stuff. Okay? Men have oxytocin in them too. He said they'll respond the same, but he said for 10 years, what he's discovered is a lot of bad boys. He said women are actually really nice, and they have a lot of oxytocin in their brain. Men don't have as much. He said every single study I have done on this, women always, 100%, produce a lot more oxytocin in their brain than men. Men just don't. He said we did a study one time where the person was interacting with somebody on a computer, and if the person was nice to him, they would measure the increase in oxytocin. If the person on the computer wasn't nice to him, women would drop their oxytocin and they were fine. When someone was mean to a male on it, they didn't produce any oxytocin, they produced something else, testosterone. And when you produce testosterone, you get angry. And he said men literally wanted to go beat that person up. He said men take things very, very personal. They release testosterone, women don't. Women just decrease the amount of oxytocin and they move on. Men produce testosterone. Remember I was saying free will, right? Something happens, you see the guy get all angry and you think, why is he so mad? It may not, it's just a brain chemistry thing that's flipping on it, okay? So the golden rule molecule, he called it, because if you do something nice for somebody, or if somebody does something nice for you, you want to do it back for them, all right? You share, you're nice, you get a lot of it, they always produce more. Ovulation, when you're ovulating, right, you produce a lot of what? Estrogen. When you increase estrogen, you guys ready for this, women? Estrogen increases your brain's sensitivity oxytocin. Ever start crying for no apparent reason? Ever feel overly emotional during that time? Because estrogen makes you more sensitive to oxytocin. Now, he was making an interesting comment. He said, this is probably because if you're at that stage where you might get pregnant, you want to make sure that the person you're with, you're emotionally connected with. So it makes sense. In that time period of your life, you don't want to just be haphazardly moving through it. Oxytocin's released, estrogen makes you overly sensitive to it so that you're very emotional and you can connect and make good bonds if you're thinking about having a baby. You have to be, remember, if you're going to have a baby, you have to have protection and you have to have help. Thousands of years ago, running it alone, getting pregnant and running alone did not work out very well for you. You needed help, okay? Testosterone is a very potent oxytocin what? Inhibitor. It shuts it off. Guy gets mad, testosterone's released, shuts down oxytocin, right? All right, men get aggressive with it. Interesting study. I've known this one for a long time. I saw this on an episode of Scientific America a long time ago. It was done in the Netherlands. They went to a nightclub, young people, dancing, partying. They did it for months. They went Friday and Saturday night. And all they did is the researchers would go into the bar and they would go up to different women and they'd say, hey, we're doing a research study out on the balcony. Can you come out? And they got a lot of women, these college-age women, sure, they go on the balcony. And they said, here's what we're going to do. They had cameras set up. You can still hear the music boom, 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 going, right? And they'd say, just dance for us. Just dance. So these women would dance, and they would video them. And the researchers then had them fill out a questionnaire. And they would take their pictures, and they send them back and say, great. And what they found after doing this time after time after time, you guys ready for this? When women were ovulating in a stage where they could get pregnant, they would look at how they dance on the videos, and they decided, hands down, they would dance more seductively. But more importantly, they took pictures of them, and they measured how much skin they showed. They almost always were dressed with more skin showing. Free will? Kind of interesting, isn't it? They know, hey, just they don't, these women don't, and they on the survey, they said, did you think about it? They think about it, the women, no, I just got dressed to go out tonight, and I was just dancing. Really interesting stuff. John Gray, has everyone heard of Mars and Venus by John Gray?
Yeah.
You ever heard the story of how he came across it? He said he was a counselor. He said he was giving a talk one time, and he was frustrated because he was trying to explain how men and women communicate and how they get along. And he goes, I was trying to explain it to this whole group of people. It was in the 70s, and he goes, I was trying to tell him, and he goes, I got frustrated, and I finally said, listen, imagine your man is E.T. and he's from another planet. And he said, this one woman said, well, where's my man from? And he goes, your man must be from Mars. And he said, right then he realized he was onto something. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We're from different planets. We interact and we do things differently. He launched his whole career on the basis of this, on brain scans of how things work. He talks about brain scans. When women think, when you put you in a brain scan so we can see your brain work, when women talk, communicate, answer questions, their brain lights up all over. Spaghetti. You're all over the place. You're over here in logic, you're listening, you're processing. Your brain is moving all over the place like lightning speed. Lightning speed. You ever had that discussion with another woman and she's talking about something and next thing you know, like, now my male brain can't keep up, right? Wait, I thought we were talking about, wait, what are we talking about? I thought men's brains, interestingly enough, in the same conversations, light up in one spot. I'm listening, and then you say, what do you think of that, Dr. Sherry? Okay, what do you think? I'll go over here to my logic department, I'll process that for a few minutes. And you're going on, right? You're now 3 conversations ahead. And I come back over to my listening and I go, I'm sorry, what are we doing? What are we at? And you go, were you not listening? And I go, hold on. And I go back to my memory. I go, no, I was listening. And then I go, wait, what are we talking about now? You guys see how that can create some communication gaps, right? Women's brains are like high-speed computers. You pay a price for it though, because it drives you crazy. Remember all those women said if we could just get it to stop, it would be great, right? Men don't get that because I'm here and then I go here. We're just kind of like, we turn the, I'm over here in this room and then I turn the light off and I walk to this room, right? My head doesn't just shine everywhere across it. He has a ton of really cool videos. Go to YouTube, pull him up and listen to him. He's got a bunch of good stuff. He's really funny when he presents. He'll walk you through this as well. Okay, now we get down to some of the brass tacks on this, on how the brain actually works. Now, don't get freaked out by this picture. I just kind of put it up for my own memory. When babies are born, inside of our brain, we have 2 hemispheres. We got this half and this half, okay? And they're connected by that white band right there called the corpus callosum. So that the two hemispheres can talk, right? Remember, you got one artsy side, one logic side. They have to communicate back and forth. And if you really want to see something cool, they do have people where they cut that. They slice it so the two hemispheres can't talk, and there's all kinds of weird stuff that takes place when they do that. Women's corpus callosum, the communication between the two hemispheres, is 25% bigger. 25% bigger. You're able to move information freely back and forth much more rapidly than men. Your hippocampus, which is deep in the middle of the brain. Don't worry about the fancy name. Hippocampus, by the way, is Greek for seahorse. Okay? Hippocampus, it looks like a seahorse. It's for memory. It makes you remember things. Women's hippocampus, tremendously bigger than male's hippocampus. So when you sit down and say, I was thinking, and do you remember that conversation we had 10 years ago? When you said you like bananas, but you don't like banana nut bread? And I was thinking, listen, I don't have a hippocampus big enough to remember that. It's not that I'm being hungry. I don't remember. I honestly do not remember the banana nut bread conversation. I don't. Men don't have the ability to remember like you guys do. Women's brains are really, really good at remembering things. Okay? They're really good at remembering things. White matter, okay? So when you look at a brain, the outer part is gray. The gray part is where the cells are. That's the processing part. That's the thinking part. All the white part is the communication network, right? So those are like the telephone wires. The gray matter is the actual phone where people are putting in data. All the telephone wires are the white matter. Guess what? Women, 10 times more activity in the white matter. Why? Because their brain's dancing all over the place. It's amazing. Dancing all over the place, right? Their prefrontal cortex, up here where you make decisions, is hugely larger. Decisions, social judgments, details. We're at a wedding the other day. We're walking out of the wedding. My girlfriend looks at me and she says, did you see that couple? The guy that was wearing the brown jacket and he had on the black shoes and that he had that really big belt buckle and he was with a woman that had the kind of the bigger hair. She had a really, did you see the diamond on her finger? And she had, do you remember her? And I go, I have no idea what you're talking about. She goes, you didn't see the woman? Remember she had blue sleeves and the red like halter top thing right here? You didn't see her? Remember she pulled her phone out? I'm like, how do you know that stuff? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Were we in the same party? Like, I don't. She's like, how do you not see that? I'm like, how do you see that? I don't know that. I have no idea. Women are better at noticing detail. Women have a radar, by the way. Because of their ability to look at the faces really well and define it, women can look at faces and pick out reactions much, much better than males. Much, much better. Why? Probably babies, right? Also, you have to remember, women are more at danger, right? So they're more worried about environment. When you have other animals that are a lot bigger, faster, and can kill you, men can kind of fight. Like, that's the whole deal. Men are there to survive and protect and do all these things. Women are there going, we're watching the situation. I'm keeping an eye. I'm always watching. You guys have to be a little more political. I gotta know who to mate with. I gotta know who to hang out with. I gotta know who's going to protect me. Men are just big and stupid moving through the world, right? We don't care about that so much. We're just there to move. Male brains, surprisingly, we have a larger, what's called amygdala. That's deep in the middle of the brain. And the amygdala is for what? Fighting. It's for aggression. It's for getting pissed off. That's what it's for. That's what it's for. Does it surprise you that men have a larger amygdala? Guess what amygdala responds really well to? Testosterone. That's how it fires itself up, right? Men's gray matter, the processing part of that brain, is 7 times more active. In other words, we're able to go to the gray matter and really focus, and we get tunnel vision. Right? The other day I was working on the garden, right? I went out, I had one thing in mind. I had to put the fence around the garden because the dog was digging up the vegetables. I got to put that fence in. I was out there putting on the fence, and I don't know, like 5 things happened in the house, and they came out and they're like, did you not hear the dog? You didn't hear the mailman? You didn't know the dog was out front running and was chasing the neighbor's rat, and you didn't know that the neighbor had a heart attack? I'm like, where was I? Did I miss something? She's like, you didn't know the fire department was here like 10 minutes ago? I'm like, all I know is I got the fence up. I know that's good, and the dog won't pick up the lot anymore. So gray matter, body, we're much easier to just focus and stay on things. Women are good at processing all kinds of things. Okay, we talked about that. Here's a really interesting one. This Norwegian study they took college volunteers, and they would put them into an MRI tube, big machine, right? And they had orgasms. And these guys were like, listen, no one's done this. No one's looked at the human brain when they have an orgasm. What does it do? They want to find out. So they had a bunch of college women volunteer to come in, they put them in the tube. They had a bunch of college guys. By the way, the number, guess how many men signed up? Listen, that alone is a big difference. They had so many males volunteer, they're like, yeah, we can't, we filled this position like a long time ago.